Alright, so hi again YouTube. So today's video is going to be called UFOs, Gnosticism, and the Simulation Theory. So I'm adding the simulation theory to the discussion because I want to maybe show theoretically that some of these ideas in Gnosticism are possible, and also some of the other ideas I'm going to be talking about, like synchronicity and the power of intention. So first, let's just get into a little bit about what simulation theory is. Um, oh, by the way, this is my website here if you guys want to check it out. It's just deepthinknet.com. That's a painting I did right there. But yeah, I have a little blog. Mostly it's just my videos in there, and then I have, yeah, so check it out if you want. But basically what simulation theory is just a theory that we're living in like sort of a mass or a total immersion mass multiplayer video game, basically. You know, that's it. So, some of the reasons why people think that this theory might be true is just some of the weird things that take place in our universe. Some of the weird laws of physics, like in relativity and then quantum physics. So, let's go over a couple of those. The first is this time dilation, right? So, real basically, well, time dilation deals with velocity. It deals with subjectivity. Velocity, relating to another observing person or an observing object or something like that, right? And gravity. So we're just going to deal with velocity right now. So for those of you who know about computer games and gaming, say if you don't have like a dedicated GPU, you just have integrated graphics or something like that, and then you put in a game like GTA 5 or something like that, or some really high intensity 4K game, and then you install it on a shitty computer, and then you try to play it. It's not going to render at speed, right? It's going to render like really slow, like 1 or 2 frames per second or something like that, right? And so, like some games, you can load, and then you can actually walk. The character can walk around just fine, but as soon as you try to run or get in a vehicle and take off, it's not able to render um, that. It can't render the video at speed, right? Because there's not enough processing power. So you can look at time dilation the same way, right? So if a spaceship or some kind of craft took off from the Earth and traveled near the speed of light and came back, say the trip took 5 minutes, right? The person in the ship would experience himself being gone for 5 minutes, but us on Earth as an outside observer, we would see the time would be like, I don't know, maybe 50 times slower or something like that. Maybe we would experience, instead of 5 minutes, we would experience 5 days or something like that, right? And so we can witness the time lag, but the person in the craft doesn't witness the time lag. And so it's similar to a video game where if you were gonna put yourself in the shoes of the character in the game, even though the game was lagging, the character wouldn't notice any difference. He would just get in the car, run, drive around, whatever, and time would pass as normal. But to the outside observer, we would see the lag, right? And so you could say that time dilation is just computation lag, where our reality is so high definition. It's like super ultra high definition, where it goes down to the Planck's length, right? And so to try to render an image in that high definition at that velocity, we come up on the sort of limitations of the universe's processor, right? And so you can see that as a processing lag, and it's very similar to how computers lag if they're not powerful enough to render an image. So there's that, and that's what time dilation is, and you can check it out here on Wikipedia. I'm not really sure what to do, on the computer screen, so I just kind of bring up Wikipedia or something like that. That's fine. And so the other weird thing is this double slit experiment, right? So here's a good picture of it. So basically, they shoot. Where is it at? There's a better picture. Okay, so they shoot like an electron through these double slits, right? And they only shoot one electron at a time. But over time, this pattern here develops. It's a wave pattern, right? So it looks like that somehow the one electron splits in two, goes through both slits, and then bounces off and interferes with itself, creating a wave pattern on the back of the screen there, interference pattern, right? And so that was baffling to scientists. So what they did is they put a little detector to try to see which slit the electron was going through, right? And when they did that, it just collapsed. to what you would expect. Over time, a pattern of just two slits developed, and then have the rest of these interfering, patterns. There was no interference pattern at all. It's what you expect to be in sort of a classical materialistic world, right? Where you throw an object through a slit and it hits the wall behind it, leaves a little mark, and over time, you get just two slits. And so that's kind of weird. So what they did a bunch of different experiments. One of them was like they put the detector there to see what slit it was going through, but they didn't record it. And when they don't record it, it returns to this interference pattern, right? Then they would record it, but they would delete the data. No one would look at it. They still had the interference pattern, right? The only way to get it to collapse to a classical materialist sort of pattern with just the two slits would a human beings has to observe the data, right? There has to be a consciousness that observes it, right? And so if you put this in the context of video games, right? So just to save processing power, to be efficient, the video game isn't going to render the entire map at once, right? It's only going to render the image as needed. So as the character, like looks in different directions, then the image is rendered. Whatever's behind the character is not rendered. There's no reason to render that image because it's not needed at the moment, right? And then even far away, the image gets rendered as the character walks forward a certain amount in the distance, right? All that is for processing efficiency, right? And we see the same thing with this double slit experiment. So it pretty much proves that it has this interference pattern, which is the particle's non-local. It's only it's in a state of probability. It hasn't collapsed into any cohesive state, right? It hasn't rendered as an image yet, right? But except when it's observed. When it's observed, then it renders as an image. So you can see that quantum physics, if I'm looking around, my reality is rendering as I'm observing it to save processing power. So it's very similar to video games. And of course, it's much more complex than that. I'm just giving a very simplified explanation. So don't get your panties in a bunch if you're smarter than I am and you know more about it than me. But that's basically what it is. So, anyways, the next thing, there's this. It's another sort of double slit experiment, but it's called the delayed choice quantum eraser, right? They wanted to see if they can trick the experiment somehow, right? And so what they did is they entangled a set of particles. Oh, and by the way, so this double slit experiment has been tested all the way up to a carbon-6 molecule, right? And so it's not just subatomic particles that display these weird characteristics in double slit experiments. It's actually molecules as well, right? And so it does impact the macro world, right? And so I think this thing about, you could call it quantum information theory. So it goes from a qubit to a bit to calculation, right? And so a qubit is in a state of non-locality, a state of probability, but it's pre-rendering. It's pre-rendering. And then once it's observed, it goes to a bit. It's either a yes or a no, and one or zero. And then from the one or the zero, the bit, you get calculation, right? And you can see time as calculation. And then once you get time, then images become rendered, right? So it's qubit to it, I think is how they say it. Anyways, back to this thing. So they wanted to figure out, if they can trick it, right? And so there's two. This thing's very complex, but let's just to simplify it, say this part right here where my mouse cursor is. That's the first detector, right? And say this one over here is the second detector. And so what they would do, using a series of mirrors and different things, they would send these entangled particles through, and the first one would hit here, right? Which is not measured. And so since it's not measured, you would expect to get that interference pattern, right? So later on, since this one is much farther away, it takes a longer time for the entangled particle to hit this one over here, or let's say this one, right? And this one is measured. So for this one, you would expect to get just the two slits because we're observing it, and it should collapse into a materialistic reality, right? Or a materialistic state, a rendered image. But it doesn't, right? Oh no, it does. I'm sorry. It does. But this one also renders as a materialistic rendered image, right? It renders as the two slits instead of the interference pattern, right? So somehow it self corrects. It figures out once this one hit and it's rendered as an image and it's observed. It says, "Oh shit, uh, this one back here should have been rendered as an image too because they're observing us." And so let's call it the phenomenon. The phenomenon goes back in time and it corrects history to show this one as a rendered image too, right? And so not only, you know, is reality only rendered as a as needed basis, just like in a video game, time is also relative in this whole dynamic, So it can actually go back in time and update time. So now we got that sort of understanding. Let's talk about um, Gnosticism a little bit. So I got some notes down here. I'm trying to keep myself on track. All right, so I said that, did that. Yep. So we're going to talk about Gnosticism, as a religion in the context of it being a cargo cult, right? So cargo cult, the idea, you can read it. This is in Tom DeLonge's book. Check it. It's a pretty good read. It's the first of his Secret Machines, Gods, Man, and War, and this one's called Gods, right? And it's basically just about sort of how all religions have their origins and their interactions with UFOs or alien species, right? And so the cargo cult is, I guess, during World War II, there were some islands with these Aborigines, and the planes, cargo planes, would come in and land on the island, and they used it sort of to stockpile supplies and stuff like that, and they would take off, whatever. After the war ended, of course, all these planes took off and stuff like that, right? And the Aborigines thought that they were gods, and so they built these model airplanes, right? And they sort of worshipped the model airplanes and the other beings, the white people, the humans, or the Americans or whatever, and they sort of saw them as gods, right? And that's why I call it a cargo cult, right? It's because they take something, a technology they don't understand, and they give it sort of a mythological or a spiritual sort of meaning, right? And so if we look at Gnosticism in the context of the cargo cult phenomena, right, we can look at, so let's talk about the God spark, right? And the God spark in humans. So in Gnosticism, human beings have this spark, right? We're related to the original sort of moment of creation. We're related to God, the creator, right? And so what is God? What is God's power? His power is to create, right? And so if you interpret the spark in every human being as a power to create, not just to create artistically or create science or philosophy or anything like that, but actually maybe we have our own little power to create reality a little bit, right? And so if you look at the concept of synchronicity, right, where just to keep it simple, it's one of Carl Jung's theories. But basically, synchronicity is just like a sequence of coincidences that are let's see, so unlikely, as far as statistics, that you have to assume that there's something more to it. I don't know if most people had that experience. Like, so if you think of a new concept, like, oh, I never thought of that before. I want to learn something about that. And then, you just jump on YouTube real quick, and then all of a sudden there's this suggested video that's going to explain the entire thing that you were just thinking about, even though you've never searched for it before in your life. Just like weird coincidences, like when you're thinking about this person you haven't seen in 10 years, and then, 2 minutes later you pull into a 7-Eleven and there they are checking out. It's like, what the F is going on? And so there's these weird coincidences that happen, right? And so if you look at quantum theory, especially the many world theory, right, there's an infinite spectrum of different dimensions, right? And all possibilities are happening simultaneously within every dimension, right? Me, picking up the mouse, and then me pretending like I'm picking up the mouse with no mouse in my hand. Both of those same exact occurrences exist in different dimensions simultaneously, right? So if you sort of look at it synchronicity, like where consciousness is non-local, right? So we're not localized just to this dimension, maybe. Or maybe we can sort of just kind of pick up and roll through the Rolodex, kind of, so to speak. And so when we drive into the 7-Eleven, when we think about a person we haven't seen in 10 years, we can kind of up ourselves out of, this dimension, spin through the Rolodex into a universe or a dimension that where we see that person in 7-Eleven, and then incarnate our consciousness into that experience or something like that. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's just an idea, whatever. But in any case, that's synchronicity, right? So our intentions or our needs or wants or curiosities have some sort of impact on the playing out of time in the world and reality, right? And then there's also this thing of the power of intentions, right? Feeling really confident about something. Have you ever? So we moved from California to Seattle, right? And I was talking to someone, but I kept telling everyone, yeah, we're gonna, you know, move to Seattle. And they're like talking about, oh no, you shouldn't do that. It's problematic, so expensive over there. You're not gonna be able to find a job and something like that. And I remember someone was telling me that, and I got really frustrated. And I was like, no, I'm going to a job interview next week. I'm gonna get the job. We're gonna move there. I'm gonna buy a house, and that's it. I just said it like that, and with the frustration and the energy and the confidence I said it with, I mean, I must have imprinted, time or something like that, because that is exactly how it played out. I got the job. We moved here within 6 months. I bought a house here, so it was ridiculous. You know, and so maybe human beings have this spark of God, this very minute, ability as an individual to influence reality in some way, right? And so maybe as a collective, 7 billion human beings large, maybe we have a pretty significant ability to influence how the world plays out, right? So to get into the alien thing, um, so it's like, what if like these? I think that I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure in Gnosticism they talk about how there's these what they called archons and the demiurge, and the demiurge is kind of like this dark god or something like that, and the archons are kind of his minions or something like that. So they say they don't have the spark, right? And so there's this animosity and jealousy maybe towards men because we do have the spark or something like that. And so what if these are beings from another dimension, right? Um, and maybe that their spark doesn't work in our dimension. They don't have that same power to influence the reality in this dimension, maybe only their own dimension, or maybe they don't have it at all. Who knows, right? But in this dimension, say they don't have it, right? But they're far more advanced than we are. They're way farther advanced in technology. Maybe they're extremely, intelligent, way more intelligent than us, right? And so maybe they're idiots in their dimension, right? Maybe they're just like criminals, or just like the throwaways or the dumb shits or the just the idiots, and they're like, screw this place, let's go to a dimension where you got species that are still developing and we can become gods there, right? And so maybe they're here as gods, but they lack sort of this creative power. And so maybe they can, by manipulating the masses, they can sort of use the sort of manipulated will and intention of the masses to create a world that's favorable to their own power or something like that. And so what they do is maybe they do have some sort of connection to these secret societies like Bones and Skull and the Illuminati. What's the other one where they build shit with a little deal like this? The Freemasons. And so maybe they work through these elite sets of secret societies, right? And they promise them, sort of life extension technology or something like that, or maybe they have, the technology to help them merge with machines. I don't know. Probably has something to do with immortality and power and something like that, right? And so if they betray their own sort of people, their fellow human beings, into manipulating them into this weird false reality where people don't understand their their own creative power, you know that yeah. So geez, where'd I go? If they're able to manipulate us, for the benefit of these demiurge or these reptilian aliens or the Greys or whatever you want to call them, right? That they can use these elites and these people who sort of sell their souls, and maybe the devil is really these beings from another dimension or from another planet, but lack a creative urge or something like that that human beings aren't have. And so how that connects to the simulation theory, where if it is a simulation and we can show that we can alter time, you know, or at least the phenomena, whatever that phenomena is, that goes back and alter time in that second double slit experiment I showed you, this delayed choice one. So maybe, and we do notice that phenomena a lot of synchronicity and the power of intention. So I'm just saying by using the simulation theory, it makes those things possible, right? Because if it is a running software, we can sort of control the rules of the software, and we can make mods to the software and all that kind of stuff, and maybe our intentions, our thoughts are actually modding the software all the time. And so maybe it's not a simulation like this actual role-playing video game, but maybe the way the universe really works is so similar to how we, compute information in computers that it's just a very useful analogy, to help us understand that. So I think I kind of wrapped it up, you know. So I'm thinking that maybe Gnosticism, from a cargo cult explanation, is just that, like the aliens coming here manipulating the creative power of the people in order to create a world that puts them in power, makes them gods. And they have some sort of animosity towards us because they're powerless, but they're far more advanced and intelligent than us. They use sadistic fucks in positions of power to manipulate the masses to keep us away from the knowledge of our own power. So I'm not saying I believe all that. I just, as a thought that came up when I was driving today, I thought it'd make a really interesting video because that's what I like, is just talking about all these crazy possibilities that could be, So hey, if you like this talk, if you like my videos, please subscribe. I got a notice from YouTube saying they're gonna demonetize my account because I don't have 1,000 subscribers yet. So if you can get on there and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. Give me a thumbs up and a comment. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good day. Bye.